title of our article is May the Patterns Be With You, a framework for HCI patterns development. I'm Diego Moreira da Rosa, and the other author is Milene Silveira. I'm a PhD student from PUC's from Brazil. Me and Milene and we are from Porto Alegre, southern Brazil. And right now I'm talking to you from Lugano in Switzerland. I'm staying for a period of time here on mobility, PhD mobility period here in Università della Svizzera Italiana, USI. So I brought some topics about the article for that I'd like to highlight. So the first thing is what you are going to find in this paper. So we did a historical review of patterns and pattern languages since the beginning of the proposal of patterns from the 70s, from Christopher Alexander in the area of architecture. Then we did a systematic literature mapping of patterns in HCI, which is our research area. And we chose 6 HCI conferences around the world and selected 50 papers to do this systematic literature mapping. And based on the findings of this mapping, we made a proposal of a framework for HCI patterns development. So it's like a step-by-step for HCI researchers to develop and identify and develop HCI pattern languages, which we think is the potential audience for this paper. So we believe that academics interested in HCI patterns research could be a potential group. And then interaction designers and UX practitioners looking for references in looking for pattern references in a specific area of HCI, like professionals looking for specific patterns in a certain area, or HCI researchers developing new interaction patterns. And why we think this paper is important. We identified, well, patterns is part of my PhD project. So this was our first interest. We identified that in the beginning of research on patterns in the HCI area, there was an initial hype. People were very motivated and many workshops were happening. And then over the years, this interest waned, like patterns lost a bit of strength in our area. So there were, when we would like to know maybe why, and maybe made a proposal to try to change this, because we think patterns still have some interesting points in terms of research, especially. So there were a few secondary studies on HCI patterns, and most of them are now outdated. So we couldn't find many reviews on HCI patterns. None of the ones that we find were based on a systematic approach like we did. And the ones that we found are already outdated right now. So based on our findings from the mapping, we made a proposal of a framework, which we think can help researchers to develop and publish more good quality patterns. That's another problem we identified in conferences and journals. We can find some patterns, some pattern languages in the HCI area, but most of them don't get published online or in other, or in books, for example. And the ones that get published don't stay much time online. Our research started with a pattern language, which is a famous book by Christopher Alexander, in which he defines the concepts of patterns and pattern languages in the area of architecture. This book is from 1977. And here there is only an example from this book, a half open wall. So the examples of Alexander were based on constructions, buildings, and cities. In computing, patterns started to gain momentum on the 80s in the software architecture, software development community, software engineering. So we have the famous book Design Patterns by the Gang of Four around 1994, which introduced patterns to the object-oriented programming languages. And here I just picked an example of a user interface pattern, which is more in our area, HCI. This is a current website, one of the few ones that still survive on the web, with an example of user interface pattern. Like here we have password strength meter. So widget to identify the strength of a password. Regarding our systematic literature mapping, we chose 6 conferences on HCI. We know that not including journals or maybe other conferences had an impact in our discoveries. And if you want to know some of the rationale behind this, I think I'll not describe the details of this decision, but you can find it in the paper. But we tried to choose one conference from each continent, and obviously CHI conference, which is a conference which attracts researchers from all over the world. But besides CHI, we also picked IHC from Brazil, representing South America, Nordic CHI, representing Europe, Africa from Africa, India HCI from India, and Aussie CHI from Oceania. The main contributions of our mapping, we could present a recommended terminology based on the terms that we discovered in these papers, in these 50 papers. We also identified the most common, most used research methods used with the HCI patterns. The structure and attributes that HCI researchers use with the patterns more often. And also to try to organize our findings, we made this proposal of a framework that describes the process of discovering patterns in HCI. So this is the main image of our framework. So we identify these 3 main phases, which would be like a planning phase before discovering the patterns, and then a discovery phase, which starts with identifying the patterns and then constructing the whole pattern language. And these were based on steps that we found in these 50 papers. Also on the right, we describe some outcomes from the process. So we start with the pattern collection with just a set of patterns, and then the pattern language is these patterns and the relations between them. Pattern library is when the patterns get published online or in a book. And then the third phase is the post-discovery phase. We also noted that in these papers, there is frequently further discoveries from the pattern language, like after discovering a pattern language, researchers usually do some extra analysis from the pattern's usage or from the discoveries that are byproducts of the discovery phase. And also, we propose this iterative nature of the framework, in which after we define a pattern language and use it to maybe construct new user interfaces, for example, and then we can identify like weaknesses or opportunities for improvement, and then start planning an update for the language and discover new patterns or modify patterns and so on. So this would be, in our point of view, an iterative process.